Imagine this is the mantle, and we have our cleat. You see how that would pull it up against the wall? Stay tuned to watch the process of Josiah's Mantel Surround project. After Kai and I took measurements, I googled the fireplace installation manual and I started modeling the existing fireplace. As you can see from the manual, the further the mantle protrudes from the wall, the greater the vertical clearance suggested. Before wasting any time on materials, I almost always design a project in SketchUp. The design was based off some example photos the client provided. I looked at the angled pieces and remembered an old neighbor talking to me about crown molding being a challenge. I'd never done crown molding before, but figured I'd need to apply similar techniques here. What I learned is that compound cuts for crown molding can either be cut with the pieces angled against the fence or be cut flat by adjusting the bevel and miter using a lookup chart, the latter favoring larger pieces. We got some work to do. I don't normally use tape to mark my panels, but I am today because I want to minimize the amount of sanding of this plywood veneer because it has a certain thickness. these are gonna be the pieces for the face frame. I'm looking at this long horizontal piece. It's obviously twisted. You can see the gap under there. I've got it clamped on that end, and I just wanted to see how much force it takes to flatten it out. Not much at all. So I'm not gonna run this on the jointer. I wanna keep this as thick as possible. So even though it's twisted, I'm gonna be able to clamp that in place, and everything will, when it's glued together and assembled, that's gonna hold flat, no problem. Well, one thing about this not being flat, that would cause it to bind in the table saw blade and have a lot of burning. That is especially the case with thicker stock. However, this being only 1 inch, I think since it doesn't take much pressure to hold it flat, I'll be able to use my Jessam stock guides to hold that down. I needed to make a decision for all of my domino settings, so I did a practice. For this piece here, this is where I ended up. And if you want to see how deep that plunges, I did a side plunge here. You can see that is pretty close to coming out the other side, but that's fine in this case because every single mortise, the back side is not going to be seen. So the settings I went with is a 5mm bit. The fence height is all the way down, and the plunge depth is 15mm. I am on the loose setting for all of these mortises, and of course at a 45-degree angle. Since this face piece will need to match up with this mortise here, I want the face piece to be offset, so to the left about 1/8 of an inch, 3mm. So I'm trying to figure the placement for the mortise that I have marked right there. And so I took some calipers and measured that distance right there. Ends up being about 4mm. So I'm gonna try a setting of here to achieve 4mm plus 3, so 7mm. We'll see how that goes. Okay, this is interesting, something I've never noticed before. Watch this. If I raise my fence, and I've got the fence in the 0-degree position, I'm going to try to bottom out. Okay, see that gap right there? Now watch this. As I move my angle to the 45, if I try to bottom out the fence, there's no gap right there. I've never noticed that before. Watch this. If I try to open it back up, or if I try to go this way, that gap opens up. And if you can see that on this back side, you wouldn't want it to close any more than that. Otherwise, your fence is not going to clear your cutter. That is Almost like it was designed that way. Crazy. So now if I want to go from my angled cut to my perpendicular cut, and to achieve that gap that I was talking about, before we were bottomed out. So see, there's no gap right there. So I'm going to raise my fence. I'm going to insert a 1/8 spacer. I'm going to lock that out. Take out my spacer. Put the fence in the right position. Lock it in. And test cut. Since that is flush now, I want to go another 1/8 inch. Going from an 1/8 inch gap to double that 1/4 inch gap. Let's see how that increased gap does. If you look at my mock-up, blocking needs to have no gaps. So I've lined it all up, and if I push this piece all the way up against the block, I want to see how much gap that leaves here, or how much overhang, I should say. And down here, I've determined that because I've put in these shims until they become flush with the face right here. So that ends up being 1/8 inch shim and 1/16 inch shim, or 32nd. So when I set my domino position, wherever I set this one at, I need to add these shims before I plunge into this piece. So I set fence depth up to 20. That's the thickness of the plywood stock I'm working with. Here's the gap. Now what I want to do is add those shims. Because I already made this plunge. Okay, I put it up. This is the outside up against the fence. Put it up against this stop. I plunged and I made that mortise. Grab those shims. An 1/8 plus a 32nd. I have to take that off. There it is. Needs to go right there. That's better. So now that those are flush, as predicted, the blocking inside sits in flush. I focused on getting this joint just right between the molding and the face frame. And then once I got that, I went to the next joint, which is here. And now that I've got that right, I'm going to make all the mortises for the face piece and the side panel. It's been kind of hard for me to picture how high exactly the face piece needs to go. But let me show you what I'm going to do. So the horizontal face piece is going to go right here, and it's going to come down just 1/8 of an inch further than this edge. So you can see that here, it's offset a little bit. So that means my vertical face piece needs to be 1/8 of an inch shorter than where that cut is. So I have measured that length at 1045. So that vertical face piece is going to be 3 less than 1045. The part I need to do next is cut the horizontal front frame to the right width, right length. That's this piece here. So, and the way I'm going to do it is I've got the 2 legs and the horizontal piece squared up to my table. So that's clamped down there. It's at a right angle, comes down this way, and I've got this lined up with the edge over here. See how this horizontal piece is lined up with the outside of the leg. Okay, so this side is set. That means that I can cut the horizontal piece on the other side. So what I'm going to do is, there's a couple different ways. One is I can follow these 2 molding pieces down to the other end, bottom, and measure the distance between the 2. Or I can come here and kind of get a measurement this way. So these are going to be lined up like this, obviously. And then this is going to be in position like this. So if that was in position there, then this leg needs to be slid that way. And once I get it into position, then I know where to cut this horizontal face piece off at. So what I'm gonna do is, that doesn't need to be set up like that, because all I need is this distance here. So I'm gonna line up the point to this side, and then I'm gonna line up the point on this side, but I have to keep this leg perpendicular to this piece. So that's why I have the square here, because I'm gonna push the square triangle up against the leg, and that way, as I move it side to side, it's going to keep perpendicular to this piece. So, squeezing together, holding it tight up against this edge. So now I can move it in position. See it on the left or right. And since this is clamped, I can push hard up against here. And then I'm going to line up those points. So that outside piece overhangs just slightly more than 1/8 of an inch. So I want to cut this piece flush with it. So I'm going to mark it right there and then cross cut it. My brain is seriously hurting right now trying to figure out this next mortise placement. So I've marked here roughly where I want it to go. So what I need to do is transfer that to here. So I think what I'll do is I'll mark it. It needs to go here. We'll say it's right there. So like that. Okay. And now, if I want to transfer it, I need to position this where it's going to be, and I'll be routing these in the loose position, so I'll have some flexibility in the horizontal direction. So now I know I want to be right there. Exactly. Okay. Now transfer that up. So now all I have to do is get that first one in the right position for both pieces, and then I can use the domino reference tabs and pins to continue on down the line. On the miter saw, that was a 30-degree bevel. However, you think of it like this, it was at 0 and goes to 30, so it's different on the domino because we go from 90 subtract 30 to 60, so this fence is set to 60 degrees. Now I need to fasten that top panel to the face frame. In order to do so, I need to mark where my first domino is going to go. Once I do the first domino, I can continue on down the line without marking a single additional domino. Once I get those, I can position this exactly where it needs to be, and I can assemble it just far enough to know exactly where that other leg is going to land. And once I do that, I'll know exactly where to cut off the top panel piece and the face frame front. There's certain pieces I want to sand before assembly and some after. They're going to be glued together and I don't want a gap right there. So I've marked it with tape, so as I'm sanding I know not to sand that seam right there. I got all my pieces laid out, ready for assembly. Oh, I've got one leg attached. It was an absolute beast. Lining up all of those dominoes. Oh, I didn't know if it was gonna work out, but it did. It worked out very well. And down there, the joint is very tight. And I've got some, what do you call them? Collins clamps I'm gonna put on here. It was such a good idea to put in this vertical pocket hole screw, because that is grabbing the walnut, which is hardwood, and it's not tearing out at all. It's a solid grip, and it just pulled everything down together to bring in, you can't see the clamps in the way, but to bring in the gap at the seam. It worked well. It worked great. And then this to square it up, it's solid. Oh, I was gonna say, so this is working out well. This this grid pattern of holes. You see my dogs I got? My bench dogs? Yeah, you can see it. Okay, bench dog there. So we got that following the straight line. Perpendicular to that, I've got two of them. So I know between that and the corner brace that this is square. See, you've got these blocks pushing it up against those bench dogs. So, yeah, I feel good about this. Corner blocks. I didn't want miters here because this is the top of the shelf. It's gonna see a lot of use, and those sharp miter corners can be fragile. So I'm gonna put some solid wood there, and then once I get it in, I'll be able to determine how far this is away from the wall. You can see there's gonna be a internal frame that goes right here, but I've given myself some flexibility. When I put it up against the wall, I can rip this to the exact depth that I need. It's been 8 hours since I assembled this with epoxy resin, and I'm wondering how long do I need to wait to ensure that the epoxy has dried. I have leftover resin. It's pretty hard, but could probably set up for a few more hours. I'm going to pre-drill and countersink this stretcher temporary transport hold. And the reason why I'm countersinking it is so that when I put it in my truck, this face down, the screws don't rip and scratch my truck, or say I set it up against a wall at their house, I don't scratch anything. Imagine this is the mantle, front, side, back, and we have our cleat. So I'm going to take that off now, but as you imagine, if this is the wall and I'm going to butt it up against the wall, I want the receiving end to wedge down into there. You see how that would pull it up against the wall? counter board, it's on the wrong side. This is going to be against the wall. I should have done it on this side. That was a waste of an hour. Did it again. Exact same thing. Ah! Now I've got the back side ready to go. I want to flip it over so I can work on the front side now, but these plywood edges are so delicate that I want to protect it. If I have to slide around on the bench, I don't want it sliding against these edges. So this transporting temporary stretcher, you see it's offset about 1/4 of an inch here. So it can ride on that side. And then over here, I'm gonna do a similar thing where I just put in these blocks with double-sided tape, and then when I get ready to install, these will come off, this will come off, so that the plywood can sit up against the wall. And then at that point, it's okay if these edges are delicate because they're right up against the wall and nothing's gonna be able to get to it to bump it. All of this looks great. I'm super happy with it so far, except for one thing, and it's driving me nuts. I have a gap right here. Crap. How to fix it? Option A, option B. Okay, I got it. And that was a lot of trial and error. I'd rather do this than use the filler because then the natural wood grain is visible. So this is a good piece with good wood grain, and I think this is gonna work. It's even taller than these pieces, so that is perfect. I can trim off the waste. So I'm gonna glue this in here. That's a pretty good shim right there. That's pretty good. I feel like some parts where the CA glue is thicker, it makes it look darker. And if somehow I could have made that lighter, the repair would be less noticeable. That dries a little bit dark. If it's filled in, that's solid. It almost makes it look like there's a gap, but there's not. It's just dark. got a great idea to load this thing into my truck. About the backside edges getting dinged up. Okay, say a prayer we don't bump anything.
Are you taking video for his Instagram? I'm getting out of it then. What are you doing? I don't want to be in this. Don't drop it.
There you go. You got the idea. Exactly right.
What did we just say, Kai?
Michael.
Right.
Don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it.
Okay, Kai, it's a straight shot. There's not much to worry about.
You hit a wall. It's on you, man. Look at it. I'm not doing that, jumping. Here, wait. Here.
You have to watch for sounds.
About home free, almost there. Oh, that looks so good.
That looks so good.
Oh, super easy. This side is not completely seated. So if I insert some shims between the cleat, that'll raise this and it'll wedge against the wall better. Okay, these shims, they're just an eighth of an inch, but that's all that's needed to lift it up, lift the bottom up just a little bit to pull it up against the wall. That's snug. We're good. Nice. Let's get some photos and call it a day. And that's the process of Josiah's mantel surround project. I hope that by sharing this, some might be inspired to make and create awesome things.